The communal clash in Sambhal had a clear victim, the Hindus. A report said Hindus are the aggrieved party. Except this report wasn't published in 2024. It's from 1924, and its author was Jawaharlal Nehru. A century before Sambhal took center stage in the national conversation for a communal clash over surveying the origins of the town's Jama Masjid, it was a cause of great concern for M.K. Gandhi and the Congress Party. So much so that Gandhi sent Nehru to Sambhal to study an incident. Owing to their large majority in the town and neighborhood, and for other reasons, Muslims have all along been top dogs in Sambhal, Nehru observed in his 13-page report written in September 1924. Nehru wrote a short letter to Gandhi, which he sent along with 2 copies of his report. In the letter, he describes how he was asked to mediate between Hindus and Muslims, and how he said he had no desire to arrange a compromise. "Whom would I represent?" Nehru asked Gandhi in a letter after the visit. "The Hindus are not going to accept me, and why should the Muslims do so? Yours obediently, Jawaharlal." Nehru arrived in Sambhal via Lucknow on 8 September 1924 after groups of Hindus and Muslims clashed in the town during Muharram, which happened to coincide with an annual fair being held in the town. He spent the next 3 days speaking with Hindus and Muslims at every level, from members of the local administration to shopkeepers to priests and even sadhus. Not much seems to have changed between the Sambhal of 1924 and 2024. The town was a Muslim majority then as it is now. Both communities are on tenterhooks on the eve of every religious commemoration, both then and now. And the Jama Masjid was a bone of contention even then. The 13-page report is incredibly detailed, setting the context for the clash that took place. Nehru reproduces the Muslim version of events side by side with the Hindu version, presenting them both as comparative columns. The details of the incident are supported by demographic and cultural descriptions of Sambhal and its population, including various power dynamics between communities. It also gives us an insight into the way Nehru approached such conflicts and how he investigated them. In the report, he seems extremely aware of not just his own position in Indian society, but also the precariousness of communal balance in an India that was erupting with all manners of identity crises. It was a time before the idea of independent India was fully formed. In his letter to Gandhi, accompanying 2 copies of the report he prepared, written from Anand Bhavan in Allahabad on 12 September 1924, Nehru briefly describes communal tensions in Lucknow, Amethi, and Sambhal. Talks were on to secure an agreement between the Hindus and Muslims, and he writes that Muslims are prepared to apologize to the Hindus, but he adds that this alone will not satisfy the Hindus. The facts of the matter were, a local mela conflicted with Muharram in Sambhal. In 1923, both communities reached an agreement that the mela would not be held during Muharram, but the following year, no such arrangements were made. So on the night of 9th August 1924, a Muharram procession took place on a large scale. Nehru notes that some Hindus, as usual, took part in the procession. But tensions heightened on 11th August, which was the last day of Muharram. Many Muslims were upset at music being played, at drums being beaten during their period of mourning, and Hindu temples were asked not to play music beyond 9 p.m. But tensions broke out over this, and both sides clashed, with violence descending for around 2 hours. By the end of it, 17 Hindus were hurt and 2 temples were attacked. Prima facie, the Hindus are the aggrieved party, Nehru writes very early on in the report. 2 of their temples have been desecrated and idols have been broken. A number of them have been badly beaten and still bear the marks of injury. On the other hand, no Mohammedan to our knowledge has sustained any marked injury. It is said, however, that a few were hurt, he wrote. Nehru did also note that the Hindu side was trying to improve upon their version of events by supplying all manners of details to show premeditation and careful preparation for attack by the Muslims. They were exaggerating instances of cruelty and improper behavior by Muslims and also trying to implicate almost every Mohammedan of note in Sambhal, as well as local Muslim officials. On the other hand, the Muslims said that the Hindus tried to provoke them into an attack. The general impression of the evidence is that there was a considerable amount of hard lying on both sides, writes Nehru. The impression he gathered was that of a courtroom and carefully tutored witnesses repeating a well-prepared story. The 2 accounts differ materially on almost every important point, he wrote. Nehru describes Sambhal as perhaps one of the most ancient towns in India, even mentioned in the Puranas. He also writes that it is said that the next avatar will come from Sambhal. While the district of Moradabad, he writes, is notorious for Hindu-Muslim troubles, he makes note of how important the town was to both Hindus and Muslims. He describes the Jama Masjid as a fine temple built by Prithviraj and notes that according to modern lore, it was subsequently converted into the principal mosque of the city. 100 years later, this mosque still seems to be the central fault line in Sambhal. All this context precedes his breakdown of the incident in question, neatly presented side by side in 2 columns. The Hindu version is much longer than the Muslim version, crammed with more facts and details. Even a ganja smoker is described in this. Earlier on in the report, he writes that Hindus were more forthcoming with their version of events than the Muslims. This is despite the fact that he was accompanied on this fact-finding mission by Sheikh Badruzzaman of Babaramki district, who had left Aligarh University to join the non-cooperation movement in 1920. The report is scathingly honest, and Nehru is clearly concerned by the depth of religious sentiment forcing people to violence. The suggestion in the Muslim version that the Hindus themselves must have desecrated their temples and broken their images is pure fancy and not possible to accept without the strongest proofs, writes Nehru, describing the suggestion as absurd. On that night, Hindus were terrified, writes Nehru. They all locked and bolted their doors and waited anxiously for the morning. Similarly, Nehru dismisses the idea that Muslims premeditated the attack. But one thing is clear, that they were resentful and angry, and it may be that they were ready to accept any real or fancied challenge to them, he conceded in the report. At the end of this meticulous report, Nehru makes his final observations, an opinion on Sambhal that seems to have echoed through the annals of time. It does not appear that there was any instigation for this attack or desecration of temple from the outside. No such suggestion was made by any person, Hindu or Muslim, writes Nehru bluntly in the concluding paragraph of his report. Outsiders have of course been frequent visitors in Moradabad and have increased communal feelings, but there appears to be no connection between the Sambhal riot and the outside world. The local people are fully capable of doing it without any help or suggestion. Nehru sent Gandhi the report on 12th September 1924. On 17th September, Gandhi went on a fast for Hindu-Muslim unity, citing communal violence in Sambhal, Amethi, Kohat. Gandhi's fast over Sambhal lasted 21 days. Please read our report on this for more, and thank you for watching The Print.